Here in Georgia, I do not have to tell any of you that Election Day is fast approaching. You have probably received 50,000 leaflets in your mailboxes over the last number of months, and many, many texts and robocalls. And this morning, one, you probably came to Shul to get away from talk and prognostication about what's going to happen, polls and analysis, and I will give you a sigh of relief. I'm not going to be talking about Election Day or candidates at all. But I do want to say something about the nature of our democracy and what I believe is part of the spiritual work of upholding it. And I want to go back to the story of the Tower of Babel that we read earlier, because I think it provides a few clues as to what some of the downfalls of a society can be, and also the antidote of how we heal. So as I shared earlier, the story of the Tower of Babel is one of the stories that we may think we're kind of familiar with, and then when we look at it, we realize there's a lot more than meets the eye. So just to summarize, a bunch of people, unnamed group, band together to build a tower, and God punishes them by making them all speak different languages, kind of an origin story of how we have so many languages on this planet, and by dispersing them across the face of the earth, which was, as Danny shared, their worst fear. So we have to ask, because it really isn't clear, what was their sin? Why were they punished? Because it seems like the desire to work together as a team and achieve a sense of harmony is something we should all strive for. So why is this something that God says, I'm going to thwart all of your efforts? So to answer this question, we have to take a little bit of a closer look at the story in light of some of the rabbinic commentaries, our Jewish tradition's history of turning a story over and over again to try to understand it from every angle. And the first clue about what really might be going on here in this story, and what was so wrong with the people's efforts to build a tower in a city, comes in the first verse. And all the earth was of one language and one set of words, safa echat v'divarim achadim. So from the beginning of the story, we see this strong sense of unity that people felt. And a 19th century Lithuanian rabbi, Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, who's known as the Netziv, comments on this phrase, picks up on this interesting phrase, one language and one set of words, to try to locate the nature of the people's sin. And he writes, the people feared that since not all human thoughts are identical, basically since we have free will and independent thinking, if some people were to leave the city, they might adopt different thoughts, which would have been bad. They didn't want that. So they didn't allow anyone to leave the enclave. He writes that what emerges, a hypothesis that emerges from this text, is that these people, these city dwellers, would actually kill anyone who did not think as they did. So this wasn't just unity for a powerful purpose. This was the beginnings of an authoritarian society. And there's further proof for this interpretation if you go back and you listen to the sounds of the Hebrew themselves. If you heard as Karen and Jeannie were chanting, the Hebrew has this quality. Let me just give you some of the phrases. Hava nilbena livenim, lahem halivena la'aven, Hava nivne lanu, banu b'nei ha'adam, v'navela. So there are modern commentators, Rachel Annisfeld and Judy Klitzner, who pick up on this sort of repetition sound in the Hebrew, and they suggest that it creates almost this hypnotizing, trance-like effect that was a feature of the society, that grating sense of sameness, that everyone had to be unified on the same page and no dissent was allowed. A kind of ideological homogeneity. Judy Klitzner writes that this is a society that has achieved consensus, wonderful, but at the expense of individuality. Not so good. And this is why God moves to bring back diversity through thwarting the building of the city and the tower. So the question that this leaves me with is, is there a possibility in a society to achieve both of these goals, to achieve the goal of unity, of collectivism, of teamwork, and a sense of connection without it coming at the expense of human individuality and diversity? I think this is a question that is critical for us in a democracy, always and especially right now. There is a Quaker teacher and author named Parker Palmer. Those of you who are educators probably have heard of him or read some of his books. And he wrote a book back in 2014 called Healing the Heart of Democracy that was based on some of the ideas of the great Alexis de Tocqueville, the Frenchman who came to America to see how do these Americans do democracy. And he talked about the idea that there were certain habits of the heart that you need to practice in a democratic society. And these habits aren't just things that the leaders have to inculcate and practice. Democracy actually begins in the heart and in the behavior and really in the conditioning of every single individual in the society. And I want to tell you about 3 of them that are really just one. The first 2 habits of the heart that Parker Palmer brings forth that are necessary to practice in a democratic society, one is the notion that we're all in this together, that we can't just go it alone, even though we have this myth of being rugged individuals, that in a democratic society, our fates are interlinked and we depend on one another. And at the same time, habit number 2 is embracing otherness, is seeing ourselves both as linked up, joined up in a team, like that softball team, and also that we are next to, living with, next door to, in classes with, in workplaces with people that are profoundly, profoundly different from us. We feel safety in our little tribes. We come into our tribes. We need that sense of brotherhood, sisterhood, and we have to learn how to be together with the other. We have to. And so that leads us to the 3rd habit, which is kind of the recipe that brings it all together, which is the ability to lean into creative tension. It's the idea that when we feel that sense of being all in it together, we can approach the other, somebody who is deeply different from us, who may come from a completely different background, and understand that in that interaction there is creative potential. That actually is the only thing that will heal us, that will heal the deep soul disease of polarization and fracture that we feel as a society. So I've been thinking recently, after casting my ballot, after doing what I individually needed to do to participate in this election, what more can I do? What more can we do? And I think the reason why I'm talking about this on the Shabbat morning is because this is a spiritual practice of leaning into this tension. This is why we come together. I think this community in particular has the unique, growing in rarity attribute of being a community where we're not homogeneous. We come from different backgrounds, and we have deeply different visions about who should lead this country and what the best way forward for America, for Israel, for the globe should be. And yet, we have core values held in common that have brought us together in the first place. And, often I feel like, especially 8 years ago, there was a lot of talk about how we need to all lean into difference. We need to all, really kind of figure out our relationships with people that vastly disagree with us. And I think when that advice, whenever anyone brings up that advice, you often immediately go to the most extreme person you can think of. Maybe someone who you went to college with and you haven't spoken to in 30 years, but you see their posts on social media and they've gone off the deep end in whichever direction, and you feel this, maybe you feel, maybe you don't, some sense of obligation, like I have to go talk to them and figure out why they believe what they believe. And convince them to my side or like do some kind of cross-cultural dialogue of sorts. That's actually not what I'm talking about. I think that work doesn't often lead to a lot of success, at least right off the bat. What I'm talking about when I'm saying practicing leaning into these creative tensions of our differences and our otherness is actually going much, much closer to home. We all, if we have friends, families, coworkers, people we live with, people we live next door to, we have people in our lives with whom we share differences, but we also share deep connections and things in common. And I think there's opportunities, I at least find in my own life, opportunities every single day to practice this. So I just want to give you one example, maybe two. So I'm the mom now of a toddler and a 2-month-old. And the toddler's almost verbal. He thinks he has a lot more words than he does. Or at least he's saying a lot and we can not really understand much of what he's saying, but he's trying really, really hard. And the newborn has started cooing. So they've got some communication. And even in these early days of forming a relationship between parent and child, I'm noticing a lot of difference arises. Certainly with a toddler. Any of you who have been around toddlers or been parents or grandparents of toddlers know they want something, and you as the parent want something really different. And the question is, how are we going to negotiate this difference? There's a kind of strong arm way you can go where it's like, tough, let me just pick you up and place you in the bathtub. All right, that may or may not have success. And then there's the other side, the kind of, characterization of gentle parenting approach, which is like, I'm gonna just let you do whatever you want to do, and if it happens to align with my agenda, great. But like free and easy. And I think the practice here, at least I'm doing with my toddler, is to try to take that moment to even just see, there's a difference here. To take a moment, if I can, to like step out of my own head and agenda for the evening bath time, dinner time routine, and to see things from his world and to acknowledge his world. And then to name, you want this? And I actually want and need us to do something different. And that there's room for relationship there. I think that's the key thing I'm learning as a newish parent, is that acknowledging the difference is the beginning of the relationship connection, not the end. I think this is wisdom you can practice with anyone in your life. I myself tend to lean out of acknowledging difference because it's really uncomfortable. I know other people go right for the jugular and want to get in there. How can we hold that tension, as uncomfortable as it is, and stay in relationship? I think this is our practice for today, for tomorrow, for Tuesday, and then for days and weeks beyond. So I want to close with a little prayer, a prayer for voting, whether you have voted already or whether you plan to on Tuesday. This is a Jewish prayer for exercising our democratic power. Behold, written by Rabbi David Seidenberg. Behold, I am intending through my vote and through my prayer to seek peace for this country, as it is written in the book of Jeremiah. Seek the peace of the city where I caused you to roam, and pray for her to Adonai, for in her peace you will all have peace. May it be your will, Adonai, that votes be counted faithfully, and may you count my vote as if I had fulfilled this verse with all my power. May you give a listening heart to whomever we elect, and may it be good in your eyes to raise for us a good government that will bring healing, justice, and peace to all living in this land and to all the world and upon Jerusalem. A government that will honor the image of God in all humanity and in creation, for rulership is yours. Just as I have participated in this election, so may I merit to do good works and to repair the world through all my efforts, and through the act of giving tzedakah, charity, which I plan to do on behalf of all living creatures, in remembrance of the covenant of Noah's waters, to protect and to not destroy the earth and her plenitude. Give to all the peoples of this country the strength and the will to pursue righteousness and to seek peace as a unified force, to uproot anti-Semitism, racism, and violence, and to make healing, good life, and peace flourish here and throughout the world, and fulfill for us the verse of Psalms. May the pleasure of Adonai our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands for us. Make the work of our hands endure. And we say, Amen. Amen. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May it be so.